think about if you're Philadelphia right now, think about the depth they must have at D-line to go, hey, you know what, Josh, we're going to let you hit the market. Milton, you're going to get paid. We're good. We still have Jameis Hunt. We still have, a bunch of young guys on the inside. I mean, it's just, yeah, it is. They have stockpiled this football team for sure, and they're getting younger and younger without a whole lot of drop-off in terms of talent.
All right, so you heard Louis Riddick there. Yeah, they can let guys walk, but now what's left? And by the way, a huge trade just happened in the NFC East. The Commanders are adding Laramie Tunsil, the left tackle. So they have upgraded their offensive line significantly. The details are coming in on that one. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast on a busy day. It's Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. All right, Geoff Mosher, it's been a busy day for other teams. Philadelphia, not so much. Not a lot of surprises, but they have lost 3 players on their defense already. Let's start with the big one. Milton Williams gets a 4-year, $104 million deal with $63 million guaranteed. It sounds like they had no shot to be in the ballpark of that one there. But first, the impact of losing Milton Williams.
Well, the impact of the financial market at defensive tackle might be even bigger than the impact of the Eagles losing Milton Williams. Not that Milton Williams wasn't a very good DT. He was. He was with the team for 4 years. They drafted him in the 3rd round out of Louisiana. Really was sort of a situational player for the first half of his career. Came on a little bit year 3 and then really came on as a starter this past year. So he really turned, in essence, what was a year of really outstanding play into, I guess, the largest contract for a defensive tackle. $26 million a year, Mike, is we were reporting on Inside the Birds. We knew the market was going to be very good based on his youth, the nature of position, the fact that teams had money, and we knew what the market was north of 20. But $26 million a year, Mike, is that's a surreal number for a guy who's never made a Pro Bowl or anything like that.
Yeah, and it sounded like, he was going to Carolina, and Adam Schefter said he's getting over $20 million a year. Well, it looks like the Patriots said, if they're at 20, 21, 20, we're going to go to 26 and make you not say no. So he ends up going to New England there. So let's start with that. He's in New England. How does Philadelphia play this? What do they have in-house? Is this something that they like enough what they have in-house, or do they have to do something outside of the building?
Yeah, I mean, 2 things to think about here. One is at this time next year, we'll be talking about how Jalen Carter is most likely if Milton Williams now makes $26 million, we're going to be talking about Jalen Carter signing a contract extension that pays him north of $30 million a year, to be honest with you. So that's one. You've got that, right? And then secondly, at least for this coming year, 2025 season, they have Jordan Davis still on the team. Not much of a 3-technique pass rusher, but a big part of their 5-man front as a nose tackle. He'll play his 10 to 15 snaps. Maybe in his final year, they'll figure out a way to get him on the field in more 4-man lines, and maybe he gives you a little pass rush. But Moro Ojomo would be the guy naturally takes up most of those reps for Milton Williams. They'll probably draft at that position. It wouldn't surprise me to see them use an early pick at defensive tackle. And, they did bring in guys, Gabe Hall, who was a priority free agent, and that they signed, gave him some money to. And they claimed off waivers from the Raiders. It was Byron Young, so they were kind of, I'm not saying they were preparing for Milton Williams leaving, but they were making sure they had bodies at that position. Oh, and Thomas Booker is a guy that played fairly well for them, just didn't have the chance to play a whole lot because of how good they were at defensive tackle. So these are guys who are going to be asked to step up.
Yep. I think, and we're going to go through the rest of the lot, but that might be a position where they feel most comfortable in-house. You mentioned Moro Ojomo. He might be the guy that is the Milton Williams, right? Before Milton Williams really burst on the scene, he kind of didn't get that much playing time, but was always productive in his low amount of snaps. That could be what Moro Ojomo now. He's a guy, when he played, he was pretty productive in a low amount of snaps. But if you give him a little bit more, you might see his production go up. Thomas Booker flashed at times as well, but Ojomo is the guy that I would think to keep an eye on the most.
Like the Eagles really were happy to get Ojomo 2 years ago in the 6th round, I believe it was. They had him graded higher than that, to my knowledge. I checked into it himself, and I know that people on the Texas staff felt that he was their best interior pass rusher. And I think there are other guys who were drafted from that defensive line. So there is some good potential for Moro Ojomo to come in there. Now, will he be Milton Williams? No, but he may not. He may not have to be, or maybe he will. And we'll see. He could be the next real surprise story for the Eagles. So, yes, they're comfortable with the bodies and then the fact that they can add to that position by signing a veteran and drafting. They're not – I wouldn't say they're comfortable right now as is because you just can't hand Moro Ojomo the job and say it's yours. But they are comfortable with the fact that they've got reinforcements in-house and they have the ability through the draft and through ladder free agency to bring in some bodies to help them compensate.
All right, Moshe, let's look at JoshSweat. He gets a big deal, too. He's going back with Jonathan Gannon, 4 years, 76. Not quite as rich as Milton Williams, $41 million guaranteed money for him to go to Arizona. Is there an in-house option, or is that a spot that they need to now address?
Oh, it's definitely a spot that they have to address. The question is, everybody wants to address edge rush. There's always a lot of names, but not always a lot of scheme fits, and some of the better names are usually off the board pretty quickly. They go in next year really with just Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith. They've got to figure out what they're going to do with Bryce Huff. I think for now you just can't expect Bryce Huff is going to give you much of anything. Vic Fangio did not want to play him even when he was healthy. So that's pretty notable right there. And as much as Jalix Hunt improved, I don't know that they're ready to just say you're the starter and you're going to play 100% of the snaps there. And then you got Nolan Smith coming off the torn triceps. So this is a position that they will have to address. I think we'll have to address it through free agency. They'll have to address it through the draft. They normally do anyway. We'll see how high they go with their picks and whether it's DT or edge or a different position. But certainly they will try and they can bring in, and Howie's good at getting creative too. So don't forget about the trade market. But this is going to be a spot where we're going to go into training camp, I think, unless they make some kind of major move that I don't foresee. And you're going to be asking, can this edge group replicate what it did last year?
Well, right. Jalix Hunt would be the obvious guy. Does he get a bump in playing time, or is he a rotational player? Do they say to him, hey, you're the guy who's going to get, JoshSweat snaps?
He's certainly going to have to inherit many of them, but is he going to be available to play 65% of the snaps? That's the question. Is he going to improve that much? He can play 65% of the snaps, but does he play it as effectively in year 2 as JoshSweat just played it last year? And then, you always have to be concerned in general about depth because of injuries. If you only have two edges right now and one of them gets hurt, what are you doing? Yeah. So, and Brandon Graham, we'll see. He hasn't officially retired, but he also has to now come back from another torn triceps injury. So it's hard to see him being ready by the start of the season. Maybe he's a guy that decides he doesn't want to retire but comes back in the middle of the year to help out. Who knows? There's endless possibilities, but it's certainly a position that is thin right now at a position where they're usually deeper.
All right, Geoff Mosher, football at 4. Let's go to the other guy. It's Isaiah Rodgers, 2-year, $15 million, $8 million guaranteed. What does that contract say to you? Were the Eagles not interested? Did they offer him less? He wanted a better opportunity. What do you make of Rodgers going to Minnesota at that number?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that it's not that I thought he would get more but you just the cornerback market every year is one of the most unpredictable markets there is. And this is a young guy who can run like the wind and played well in his limited opportunities. So sometimes you see that and the team just pounces on it and overpays a little bit. I think that the money, and I'm not 100% sure that what's being reported is accurate. We'll see when the contract comes out. But even if it is, that's $8 million, right? $8 million guaranteed for a corner. That's that's not, expensive, to be honest with you. Most average number 2 corners or whatever are still in the 12 to 15 million a year range, while the upper echelon ones are north of 20. So the fact that the Eagles didn't want to pay it means one of two things. One, that they didn't view him as a starter. So why pay him? You're not going to pay $8 million for a number 3 corner. That would be a little expensive. So they either didn't view him as a starter, or they've got different plans at that position that are either a trade market or something more long-term but yet cost-effective, perhaps. Or there's option C, which is maybe the reality is that this is not the year that they're going to spend a ton of money, because they did last year, and they've got extensions. You and I think talked about this last week. They've got guys like Juergens, who is up for an extension, perhaps Nakobe Dean, Reed Blankenship. The Eagles always consider that part of their free agency.
Yeah, Joe Banner tweeted this out a little while ago. He says, not a criticism. They won the Super Bowl. The Eagles' cap situation is more challenging than it's been in a long time. They re-signed the player they cared about most, but it kind of ties into everything here. They also have guys down the line here, younger players, Mitchell, Carter, DeJean, Juergens, that they also are going to have to start considering before they bring in somebody from the outside or target one of the guys here. So I guess this is where everybody just assumes the Eagles always have their cap figured out. And here's Joe Banner saying it's probably the most tangled web that they've had in some time because of the guys that they've already targeted and the guys they know they have to target.
And it makes sense. I mean, it's not like the Eagles didn't know this themselves either, or that they entered some kind of terrain that they were not familiar with. Why'd they win the Super Bowl? Well, they had one of the most elite / highest paid offenses you'll ever find. A.J. Brown on big money. Devontae Smith on an extension. Your left tackle's on, it's not like top 3, but I think it's top 5 money for the left tackle. Left guard, top 3. Right tackle, top 3. So let's see, your edge at the time, Sweat took a pay cut, but there were guys, Slay was making good money. They have a lot. Saquon Barkley, I neglected to mention, making a lot of money. When you have that many offensive linemen, a running back, 2 wide receivers, and by the way, the quarterback who is making, a lot of money, and then you go to the defense and you find a couple of guys there too, that's the result. And the issue is, you can only restructure contracts so many times, right? And they've done a lot of restructures to clear cap space in the past. So this is why, I'm sure you're going to bring it up, but this is why you have a situation unfolding like Dallas Goedert, where they're probably, from what we understand, this from Inside the Birds reporting, that they've given him permission to seek a trade, and we'll see what becomes of that.
Yeah, so let's get into that because he is a guy that's here. He's another guy. Last year, the deal. He's a little older, not an old guy. How does this all play out? I mean, does he want a new deal? Do they just want to, do they want him to take I mean, this is an interesting one because he's been hurt a lot. He misses like 4 games a year, it seems like. But he also showed his value and his worth in the run game. They're a much better run team when he's out there. Plus, he's had some big plays for this team in the passing game. He's, you had no Yak Zach before. Goddard will run you over and get more yards. So I find this is going to be an interesting conundrum for them on what to do with not Zach Ertz, with Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, it's sometimes you've seen the Eagles trade away a decent player because, as you just mentioned, right, they got rid of Zach Ertz at a time where they had Dallas Goedert emerging. They like Grant Calcaterra, but Grant Calcaterra doesn't do what Dallas Goedert does. He does 1/2 of and not even 1/2. He catches the ball well, but he doesn't absorb contact, bounce off of it, and give you extra yards the way Dallas Goedert does. I mean, Dallas Goedert, I don't want to say he's like the reason that they won this Super Bowl, but if you look at some of the biggest plays in the playoffs, starting with the touchdown against the Packers, right, against the zero blitz, where he stiffs arm like the same guy 3 times on the way to the end zone for the go-ahead TD, he's really, really important to what they do offensively. So he's a really good player and will be very difficult to replace, except for the fact that the Eagles do have a lot of offensive firepower, and this is a deep draft for tight ends, and so they'll obviously go after that position if they can. But yeah, it's a tough guy to have to say goodbye to.
Yeah,
he's really good.
And there is some reporting that the Eagles are holding out hope for a 4th-round pick if they were to trade him, and that it would not even have to be in this particular draft. Hey, we'll take something down the road. So it sounds like they're pretty ready to say we might have to move on from this player.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's certain. Maybe if there's a restructure possible where he's making a lot. Last year they got JoshSweat back on a pay cut, but that's because JoshSweat didn't have a very good end of the 2023 season. Dallas Goedert was hurt a lot this year, but you can't say that he wasn't productive when he was on the field. Like I said, he was a big, big part of their wins and their playoff wins and their Super Bowl. So if you're Dallas Goedert, you may not be so prone to wanting to restructure in a way that you're taking less money. Maybe you will. I don't know. I never talk in absolutes, but I'm just kind of trying to put myself in his cleats there.
Okay, Moshe, there is some conflicting reports here, nothing official, but a little surprising to hear Darius Slay's name come up today. Now, nothing can happen with Slay yet. There was a report that he was going to the Steelers. That's kind of been refuted. But I would imagine it's more semantics of why that's not official, because he has essentially said, I'll play for Detroit, I'll play for Philly, I want to play again. He's not mentioned anybody else. But I found it to be interesting because once Rodgers went to Minnesota, does that open the door for the Eagles to get back involved in the Slay business? And then this little Pittsburgh story came down. So number one, do we think that Slay has decided to expand his reach and say, I'll go play someplace else?
I mean, maybe this could be some gamesmanship. You're going to release me. I'm going to go sign with the Steelers, even though I said I only really wanted to play in certain places. Maybe he views the Steelers now with their trade for DK Metcalf and some of the moves that they made, although they have no quarterback right now, that as more of a contender. He is still the tricky part about this, and I wish that the reporter reporting it would have, articulated this, but he is technically under contract right now with the Philadelphia Eagles. They have not released him.
Right. That's officially where the semantics get involved. Even though they're going to release him,
right,
not quote-unquote technically release, which is odd that he's kind of still under contract by the Eagles, that another team can even approach him. So that's where this gets a little hairy.
Yeah, a little bit. So we'll see what happens there. Would not surprise me if it happened. I know that the Steelers, and I know this just from conversations, I know some people in that building, they've got two really good, young, talented players that most people know. One of them is George Pickens, and the other one is Joey Porter Jr., a wide receiver and a corner. But they need some veterans in there to kind of lead the locker room. You've seen Pickens especially kind of get out of hand sometimes. So
now they got DK Metcalf too.
Right, but DK's been a pretty model. He's a good worker, productive player. The way DK Metcalf is being brought in, not only for the production, but to show the way to George Pickens, Darius Slay would be a similar regard for Porter Jr., who I don't think they have an issue with as far as behavior or anything like that. But he's a young kid who is automatically now their best corner. But you want him to have to work every day. You want him to see what it's like when a Super Bowl champion enters the locker room, and how that guy worked so hard to become a 6-time Pro Bowler.
The Raiders are signing Jeremy Chin, so Commanders do lose one piece, but they have added Laremy Tunsil in a huge deal. The Houston Texans are trading Laremy Tunsil to Washington with a 4th-round pick, and Houston will get a 3rd, a 7th, a 2nd, and a 4th. So a lot of draft capital for Houston, which, Houston's a team that had Super Bowl aspirations this year, had a lot of injury issues, and now they're giving up their key left tackle. But inside the NFC East, they went out and got Kinlaw earlier at tackle, and now they're at defensive tackle. Now they add an offensive tackle. Washington is saying, hey, Philly, you're losing. We're trying to add. We're coming after you.
Yeah, certainly are. This is an interesting case of who is right because Laremy Tunsil has been a very good left tackle in this league. So you would ask yourself, well, why is Houston willing to trade him? Well, the Texans had some issues on their offensive line last year, and Tunsil was part of that. Now, was that because of the offensive coordinator who got fired? Was it because of injuries? Who knows? I mean, it could wind up being both things can be true, that he struggled, but he's still very good, and that this is still a win-win for both. We'll have to see. The way I look at it, if Laramie Tunsil is even 70% of what he's supposed to be, that's an upgrade for Washington, because then they move Brandon Coleman, their rookie, who did a nice job at left tackle. Not great, but under the circumstances, he's really a guard. So now you move him to guard. You get Sam Cosmi coming back at right guard from the ACL injury. I'm sure he'll be all right. That's 3 pretty good offensive linemen you got there. And even the guy they had playing right tackle last year, I think Wiley from the Chiefs, he actually played well. And plus, this quarterback helps offensive linemen out with his ability to run, with his ability to get the ball out quickly, with his overall athleticism. So, yes, to your point, Washington is, they traded for Debo, right? They're coming after the Eagles.
Absolutely. They get Debo. They get Javon Kinlaw, who young defensive tackle. Yeah, he's Josh. He signed for what was it? I forget what his deal was, but Josh says, "Whoa, do you think Milton Williams is going to get more than that?" Kinlaw, I said, "Oh yeah, I think he will." I guess Kinlaw got, what did he get?
I think it was $15 million a year.
15 a year, 3 for 45.
I can't say I've watched a ton of Kinlaw tape, but I know the 49ers gave up on him. He joins the Jets. The Jets didn't have the greatest defense last year. So the Commanders, but here's the thing. The Commanders drafted Jerzon Newton in the first round. They still have Deron Payne. So they've got 2 other DTs. So they're essentially paying Kinlaw to join and make a deeper D-tackle class. Well, that's more of a sum of the whole thing than the individual.
Well, and a big move today in and the weekend in the pantheon of the NFC East. You played the Rams in the divisional round. They go toe to toe with you. They're basically swapping out Cooper Kupp for Devontae Adams. So that's another team that's saying, "Hey, we're trying to stay involved in this thing." So I thought that was a pretty big move. Look, the Bears, their whole offensive line has been redone today. They traded for 2 guards, signed a center. They got Grady Jarrett on the defensive side of the ball. So that Bears team is going to be one that I think a lot of people are going to talk about with Ben Johnson now as the offensive coordinator. And then, of course, Sam Darnold goes to Seattle. Minnesota now needs a new quarterback there. So the NFC is kind of spinning around right now. But Washington and the Rams, they're 2 teams that were right there at the end of last year, and they're saying, "Hey, we're coming after you."
They are. I really like that move by the Rams to get Devontae Adams. I think he complements well with what they have there, especially with Puka. 2 guys who can make yards all over the field.
And they complement each other, whereas Cooper and Puka were kind of 2 smaller, shiftier guys. You got now the stud number 1 Adams, and then Nakua, who kind of is like the shifty, speedy, slotty kind of guy. I think at this point, Nakua is the stud number 1, and Devontae at this stage of his career is the very, very good number 2. But yes, I get your point. Maybe, I guess I'm looking at the physical body type of Adams is kind of
the X and the Z.
Yes,
I got
exactly.
You.
But yeah, Puka is awesome. But Cooper just couldn't stay on the field, and they constantly had injury problems. So that Rams team got better. Is there somebody that I'm forgetting? I thought there was another team that did something that kind of stood out.
In the NFC in particular?
Yeah, I was looking on the NFC side the Patriots have rebuilt the defense. They've signed 5 guys on that defense.
Right. No, you hit it. The Bears made I love the Grady Jarrett move for them. I know he had the ACL a couple of years ago, and he really hasn't been the player that he was, but he's not coming in there to be what he was. Again, he adds the depth that they have in the middle. They also signed the Colts edge rusher Dare. I have a tough time with the last name of there. It's like Oyebinjo, I think, but he's a pretty good player. So you gotta like what the Bears are doing. They're building.
Yeah, we'll see what Minnesota ends up doing at quarterback there, because obviously that was a good team last year. But it looks like J.J. McCarthy, they have that option, or do they go with a veteran? We'll see what happens. Justin Fields, by the way, he signed with the Jets. Sam Darnold has signed with Seattle. Geno Smith got traded to Vegas. So still some quarterback things that could be happening here. Wow.
Maybe Tampa, Mike, was the team you were thinking of, because they brought Godwin back.
Yep, Godwin.
And it's another playoff team that, has added.
All right, man. Well, it's good to see you this weekend. It was short.
It was short, but it was fun.
It was fun.
I'm glad you were in my hood. You finally gave me a call. That was nice of you.
Well, hey, listen, by the time I got to you, I was ready for bed, I think. It was a little late. Jeez.
I think you were.
It was a long day at the office for us, but we wanted to make sure we saw you on the way home there. So good to see you, man, and nice to meet your buddy over there. Geoff Mosher, make sure you guys are going to have plenty, I'm sure, on Inside the Birds. The Birds platform, and check out the podcast. Adam will be on tomorrow. Geoff will be back on Wednesday when a lot of these deals are official. Do we feel? I'll get you a quick prediction. Do we feel that Howie will do something between now and Wednesday to bring a player in?
I think so, Mike. If you look at last year's signing, we addressed this on the podcast. I dropped them this morning. A lot of that stuff was not day one. It was day 2, day 3, day 4, and then he's a master at the April, May, and June signings as well. Like Mekhi Becton was right after the draft. He's done that really well in past years. So, he'll have something. He's just not going to sit there and let players leave and not have a replacement. They will try their best to contend next year as Super Bowl contenders. We are going to have some stuff on tonight. So, and then for our Patreon folks, we're going to have a whole lot of extra content and little insider material. So patreon.com/InsideTheBirds for those folks.
All right, man. We'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Thanks, man.
There's Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, and, of course, here on Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.